Hello. My name is Corey Fabian Bornstein, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the NHA. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our very special edition of Food for Thought featuring photographer Beverly Hall, channeling Hanna Monaghan. As always, I want to take a moment to thank you all for supporting this free public program, which is made possible in part by the MS Worthington Foundation and receives media support from Novation Media. And on that note, as I always mention, Novation does an incredible job of filming every single one of our Food for Thought lectures. So if you missed any, or if you want to go back and view one again, you can see them all on YouTube. So you just need to go online to youtube.com/Nantucket history. And they're all there going back 3 years, I think. So you can really go crazy with Food for Thought videos if you want. So before we get started, if you could all take a moment to turn off or silence your cell phone so it doesn't disrupt the presentation, that would be wonderful. And while you're doing that, I also wanted to take this opportunity to announce, remind, spread the good word about a new series that we're doing at Greater Light this month, which seemed appropriate for this particular lecture. We're going to be having yoga every Saturday morning from 9 to 10 at Greater Light all through April, which is kind of a new way to get outside now that the winter is hopefully over. You can get out, revitalize, do some stretching. It'll be a kind of calm, peaceful way to start your morning. So every Saturday morning at Greater Light throughout April, from 9 to 10, tickets are only $20, and we're partnering with Dharma Yoga to bring you this series. So if you're interested, tickets are available at nha.org/tickets, or you can come and find me after the program, and I'd be happy to help you out. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce this week's Food for Thought speaker, Beverly Hall. Beverly, what? I have things to say about Beverly.
It'll be said.
I think you all already know who she is. But Beverly was born in New York City and has called the island home since she first started photographing Nantucket and its residents in 1965. She holds a bachelor's degree in art history from Columbia University, a Master of Arts from Johns Hopkins, and a Master of Divinity degree from the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In 2010, she published My Nantucket, Images of an Island, bringing together all her images of Nantucket for the first time. Also in 2010, her work was featured in a special exhibit at the NHA's own Whitney Gallery called A Passion for People, 40 Years of Portrait Photography by Beverly Hall. Now, please join me in welcoming Beverly Hall.
And the one person missing from that passion for people was a woman I'd never met, Hanna Monaghan, Hanna Darlington Monaghan. But I feel like I know her, like myself. So when I was first asked to do this on my Greater Light, or what has inspired me from Greater Light, I took the chance to look at my home again and to look into myself and my own resources and where my aesthetics came from. And I believe that Hanna and I share the same aesthetics of the gut, as a friend of mine used to say. We have a sense of intuition guiding us. Call it serendipity, call it the spirit. It's a guide that just happens to let us know what is the next step, or what is the next piece, or the right piece. And as you'll see from this slideshow in my home, and then in my Hanna's soliloquy, many of the pieces, as she said, of the puzzle of our lives connect and assemble if we just step aside and let it work. Now, I've entitled this, rather presumptuously, How a Fishing Shack on Hither Creek was Transformed into an eclectic house with multiple garden rooms by an eccentric New York artist. I did not expect to have all my degrees or qualifications mentioned, but I came here on a whim, serendipity, spirit, call it what you will. I was led to a little shack on Hither Creek. Just, I believe, as Hanna might have been led to the Greater Light, which at that time on Howard Street was nothing but an old barn, a pig pen, if you will, or a pig sty. And some of the neighbors never let her forget that. Now, I have gone a little bit too quickly here, and I'm not too sure why this slide didn't stay on, so bear with me as the spirit leads me back and forth. And what you can see here is the fishing shack that I came to. On the furthest side is the one that I never saw, but was added onto to the one where you see the young woman with her bike and the fish on the back. That's what my shack in Nantucket looked like in 1964 when I arrived. Now, my house now, as those of you who have been there for any party or event know that it is quite expanded from that shack, and I have shown a picture of it with the Greater Light window, which is why I'm speaking today, how it inspired me to continue and let that house grow as Hanna and Gertrude let their house grow and their dreams with it. Now, this copy of Greater Light on the left-hand side was my Bible for years. I carried around with me since the moment I entered Greater Light and discovered the joys and the wonders within it. And it was thanks to a guide named Selena Johnson, who was the docent at the house, and she is the one I think we can say is responsible for keeping the house going during those days before the NHA in the 90s decided it was time to renovate it and closed it for a while. Selena Johnson has said what I believe is a wonderful preface to the story of Greater Light. Greater Light gives us the affirmative philosophy of a well-known Quaker in action, motivated by inner light. It illuminates the concerns of all who really love and appreciate Nantucket or care about the quality of life there and everywhere. It reassures us that as individuals, we have the power to assume responsible stewardship of our environment. It reflects that the only world we know is here and now, all around us, where finally we realize, as Hanna did, for love and beauty and delight, there is no death. And you will hear that phrase a number of times from me. Now, these seem to be jumping, Corey. Okay, let's see if they'll stay in one place. The spirit seems to have a mind of its own today. I feel like I'm on a Ouija board. Anyway, the one quote that I also wanted to read, which is why Hanna's book and her way of thinking, if you will, her philosophy of life, so enamored me from the moment I stepped in Greater Light and picked up her book. And I think this applies to my house and to how Hanna feels about time and memory. Just yesterday, I was asked, has the island changed since you came? Then the next question, how? The answer I gave is not new, as the philosophers have caught glimpses of the truth. Nothing changes. We merely see through a glass darkly into our own slit of time, which passes. Meanwhile, we carry our own world with us like a snail plodding along, leaving a faint, glistening trail on the ground. We each move with our own thoughts on our back, and our trail, effervescent as memory is swallowed by time. She was a poet, a wonderful poet, and she expressed herself in the story of her book, as I have chosen to do so in the number of books I've done. My Home Ground is my particular favorite because it reflects my experience in my garden, and I see my garden as an autobiography of my life as it has grown from the small little fishing shack with just rubble and scrub oak and bay to a rather expansive, as those of you know who've been there, garden of many rooms. And you can see my token iron gate, of which you'll hear more later. So how did this all start with me as far as developing my theme, Greater Light, and being invited by the NHA? It started with an invitation in 2011, or it was actually 2010 when we started planning for the opening of Greater Light in 2011. The garden party was on July, can you read it, 15th? And things happened as a result of that. Signs were created, collages were made, scarves were done. A little bit more about that later. But I wanted to say something about Greater Light being a sign of its times, because it really is a glimpse into the art colony of the 30s and the 40s. And there was not an easy ride for Hanna and Gertrude. They literally were chastised by their neighbors. What they were doing was criticized, and you'll hear more about that in the soliloquy. But it is just one of those testaments to their Quaker faith and to their belief in divine mind, and that what they were doing was the right thing, and that beauty and truth literally would win out in the end. And as we know, it did, it has, and it will continue to. So here you see Hanna herself, or Beverly as Hanna, the day of the opening, dressed up in one of her eclectic outfits, as I am in my good Bloomsbury outfit today. And one of the windows, I was taken immediately by those marvelous church windows that you see in Greater Light. And there are a number of windows. One set of windows, the main set you will see in the beginning of the soliloquy, are just on top of each other. This one you'll see I've reversed it. and that is my preferred way of looking at them. And the sisters also reverse them on their view of the terrace, and you will see that in another slide. So greater light surrounds me now in my own environment at home in Nantucket. As my husband said, David, there are more greater light windows here in this house than in greater light. And it's true, and I didn't realize how true it was until I actually went around with my camera, as I did in preparation for this talk, and took a picture of those windows. This is the window in David's studio, and it is a different greater light window, but it's the same theme. And I have to give Bill Murray the most credit because he took my vision, or Hannah's vision, and translated it into these incredibly carved windows. And we also stole some paint that they were painting the windows with, so we have the exact paint that is in greater light. Don't tell Bill. Another set of windows, I call this my Hannah's bed, and it is a nicely enclosed bed. I'm a little taller than Hannah, and I don't sleep there, but she did, and there's a room you'll see in the soliloquy that looks very much like this. And again, you can see the greater light windows and a sign above it. We don't have the columns with angels, but we have angels and columns. We also have fabrics, and we have not necessarily all the art that Hannah did, but the eclecticness of her collection and the eclectic way that she put things together, fabrics and worn out this and brand new this and porcelains. It moves me, the aesthetics of the gut. We go right down to that. I don't know how to describe it, but there's something inside my tummy, literally, that just goes, oh, I love that. And I think Hannah did too, as she said so often, our beauty, their beauty must be ours. No place to put them, no money in my pocket, but we must have them. That's the way I feel. Those columns, I can't remember where they came from, but I do think I got them at a thrift shop somewhere, as well as the angels from some auction, which I probably paid too much for, but I love them. Now, Hannah and I also had a great affinity for the Romantic poets. Shelley and Keats were two of her favorites, and you'll hear me talk about Keats's favorite line, beauty is truth, truth beauty, which Hannah refers to frequently. How much decoration is too much? These are Quaker ladies, after all. Well, never leave good enough alone. I think that's pretty much what her philosophy would be. I think the idea of simplifying, well, as you can see, the tag is over some rather elaborate embroidery. So it's a contrast, it's a paradox. We like simplicity, and there's a simple, a fundamental philosophy of simplicity, but we like to complicate that. We like to do more with it. So what more can I say? Anyone who's been to my home knows how I complicate it. And there's another wonderful quote that Hannah uses in the beginning of her book. And she says that the house we dreamed of is created as such stuffs as dreams are made of. So her reference to Shakespeare, again, quickens something in my spirit. Fabrics. Fabrics, fabrics, fabrics. As you see here, they're everywhere, faded and otherwise, collected from so many places. More fabrics. You see that there on the easel, a wonderful Hungarian tapestry. Now, I mentioned the scarves that we created to honor the opening of Greater Light, and you see some of them hanging here, and I believe they all sold. Mary LaCourcier did a marvelous job creating these. It was a whim, and it turned out to be a rather adventuresome and costly one, but I believe that those who have their scarves are pleased to carry the great gates around themselves in velvet. Now, I also started creating collages, as you can see, this one collage of many different portions or pieces of Hannah's house, and I say it, they're like the pieces of the puzzle that she said keep on assembling themselves. There you can see the chairs, not the chairs, but the stairs. Chris would know very well, she walks up those stairs every day. And a piece of plaster in Hannah's room, which is during the renovation, so it was running, it was being torn off. The marvelous bird and the grapes on one of the golden columns in the patio, and the marvelous bullshot, or whatever they call bullshot, I guess, windows, were probably the bottles of glasses that Hannah and Gertrude picked up as they were demolishing a tavern on a street in Philadelphia. They had seen the tavern the week before. The next day, or the next week when they went down there, the gates, the police had channeled off the street, and the windows were on the street, half broken and half still ready to be picked up by the two sisters and whisked off to their home. A perfect idea, incident of divine light working, divine mind, that is. Now, here I have a wonderful quote. If you take a look at this marvelous lion, 2 lions, 3 lions, 5 lions, 6 lions, whatever. But this, I call it a plaque, but you'll hear in a minute from Hannah's quote. Now, I don't have lions quite as stately, although I have a few outside, but I have my little lions on top of my handmade camphor chest, and I have a little bit of my own Chinese porcelain. There you have that little, not so little, but the Buddha up there, which is another piece of Chinese porcelain. I have probably one thing Hannah didn't have, although her house is now a museum. I have a museum with my husband David of Chinese porcelain and bronzes and tapestries and you name it, a lot of other things. So we are expanding our greater light in many ways. My little miniature chair and Gabriel are just a token to the marvelous dog that accompanied them on their journeys. So I would like to read you a passage about Hannah and how she worked at her auctioning. And I'll tell you a story about what happened, how we dodged a Hannah bullet the other day. Here's the story about the 2 lions. There were 2 carved lions facing each other with golden manes and frozen smiles, holding up a coat of arms, and above them a golden crown. They may have been made, I thought, as an ornamentation to the entrance of some doge's palace. As the intoning voice started again, this is the auctioneer, I sat on the edge of my seat. There was noise, confusion, and heated bidding. I was almost mesmerized as I gazed at the auctioneer. And before I had a chance to raise my hand, the black dais turned and they disappeared. As the lions rolled out of sight, they seemed to grin at me. Gone. I rushed to the auctioneer. Who bought them? I asked. He pointed to a dealer. I called the dealer to one side. Will you sell them to me? I whispered. My pocketbook was open. I was dangling bills. Lady, he said, those go big in New York. My boss sent me here to buy them. But, he added, eyeing the waving bills, I will give you one and tell my boss I could only get one. As I followed the crowd into the street, I had to pass the carved plaque. The lion with his golden mane and frozen smile upon his face was now our plaque. As I looked back, I thought I saw the lion wink. I love that passage. I love that sense of humor, and I just adore Hannah's little, I don't even know what to say, the way she just puts something in there that turns the whole passage into something so personal and so engaging. So that is the auction story of the lions, and there are many more, and I'm not going to tell you all of them because there's more to come. Now, one thing Hannah did very well was entertaining, and she loved to have parties at the Greater Light. Now, this is obviously not the Greater Light, but it is an entertaining photo of one of my special rooms, the green room, and you can see in the back the special window, the Hanna window, and I think you can recognize the suspicious character over here who's not here today, but I'm putting in here because of his absence, Bill Tramposh, our own NHA head, and Peter Greenhouch, Peggy Kaufman, and Anna. I told you I'm going to put you in the slideshow, and there you are. So we do a lot of entertaining, and I feel very blessed to have a wonderful home to entertain with, and I constantly find new things about my home through entertaining, and I think Hannah did too. There's nothing more that she enjoyed than having a party or a poetry reading or a tea or a lot of people gathered in around her garden, which she considered was an extension of her home. There were many, many rooms in my garden, and there were a number of rooms in Hannah's garden, especially the great patio, and you'll see more pictures of this later, and those of you who've been there, of course, know exactly what that patio with its 2 peacock chairs looks like and feels like, and how you walk out through the gates into this marvelous garden, which was created out of rubble. Anyway, so is mine, as a matter of fact. And this is my supreme folly, these columns. These columns were, I won't exactly say purchased, but they were, and Whitney could tell you the story better than I at this point, but there was an auction for Habitat for Humanity, and actually I jumped ahead of my story. Before the auction, or before I even knew about the auction, these columns were a alley out at the home of Dennis Kozlowski out in Squam. And I was told early on in March about him by a friend who knew about my Shakespeare in the Garden. He said, oh, you must have these columns. And I said, of course I must. I went out and looked at them, and I knew I must have them, just like Hannah. No place to put them, none, not a place. How was I going to get them? And I didn't like the way they were, but I was going to have to transform them. Well, here they are. And so this is my folly, my supreme folly. I had no place to put them. I saw them. I fell in love with them. The beauty of them had to be ours, and they are now, all 12 of them. And more columns in the other part of the garden, plus an angel, and a marvelous red torii, which David has painted for me to spice up the garden. Unfortunately, these were all taken in the winter time recently in order to make the slideshow sort of come together now. But the garden will come alive soon, and there will be lots of activity and a little bit more green. But as Hanna had her garden as an extension of her living space, so is mine. It is a living space in the summer and the early fall. Now we get down to what the garden is all about, really, and how Hanna and I have sort of joined forces in my garden. And maybe one day I'll do it in hers. But I love to read Hanna's soliloquy, which I'll do shortly, in my garden, in my peacock chair. Sometimes with my cats, sometimes with friends, sometimes with visiting neighbors, or people who just happen to walk by. I've done it for strangers too. I just love channeling Hanna. And we're totally different. She's about this big, I'm this big, and she had white hair, curly hair, and you can see that. Anyway, my feeling about my garden is very much like Hanna's, and her quote is, "Within the grounds I feel peace and harmony." That is, when I don't see the weeds and don't have to do all the other work. But it is a place that gives me a great deal of comfort and solace, and I am blessed to have some help in it now, as well as from the cats. I have my David. And now we have a wonderful quote, which again, this jumped, which you'll hear again in the soliloquy, and I believe it jumped again. Divine Mind is working here. Come on, Divine Mind. The garden grew as we did. And it's true, my garden has grown every inch along with me since I first came to that little shack in 1964. The garden was ignored for years and years, and it was just scrub oak and bay and not much else around it. But as Hanna did, she had faith and hard work, and also, I think, have to hire a few people to help her out. So there is my garden, and a little bit of, if you will, junkyard or yard sale art, not the Buddha, but the little boy holding his pot up in the back, and a few other iron pots and a few other bits and pieces of metal you can look and find that you might know they came from someplace where I didn't have to pay for them. So again, the garden did grow as we did and as I did. Now Hanna has a wonderful story. I call this Hanna's chutzpah, in which she talks about her patio in the garden, and I'd like to read this to you from greater light. The ideas were assembling themselves. "It's like fitting together a puzzle," I said, Gertrude. One afternoon we were sitting in the studio in our townhouse. Before us on the table was the model of our island barn. It was nearing spring. The builder was waiting for the final plan. The pressure was great, but the model must be made perfect, as the final plan could not be changed. "When you have the right piece, it fits," said Gertrude. She held it in her hand, a tiny strip of paper, which was to be fashioned into a miniature copy of the grills. "1/4 of an inch to a foot. That will make our paper grill 3 inches high," she said, dipping her brush into the black paint. I was reading from an open dictionary. "Loggia," I read out loud. "No, that is only a balcony, and we are building an outdoor room." "Court," I read. "An open area in a manorial home." "No, our house is much too simple." I said, closing the dictionary, "Patio, an open area with a Spanish flavor. We will turn the pig pen into a patio." That's the spirit, Hanna. And as we both did, we turned a fishing shack or a pig pen or you name it into something much more wonderful, transformed by the inspiration from Divine Mind, Holy Spirit, aesthetics of the gut, you name it. So here we have a little bit of photographs of my greater light through my mind as Hanna, or my heart as Hanna. And now, after all these reflections, I am going to let Hanna speak for herself. So many events in this tale happened decades ago, but now the urge has come to share with others our view of heaven as we see it here in this one spot. We are not speaking about a locality, but a state of mind. It was 40 years ago, but it seems like yesterday. My sister Gertrude was drawing some letters on a long wooden board, the name we had chosen for our home, Greater Light. We nailed it to the corner so that all who passed by might read it. Why, I can still hear our preacher reading that phrase from the Bible. And God made two lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And today, as I sit here, the early morning shadows creep across the garden, the scent of peonies, lilies, the memories of so many friends and family gathered around this patio, laughing and sharing stories. Gertrude with a book on her lap on that chaise, our angel Gabriel, curled up at her feet. This garden grew as we did. Why, just look by those stone steps. Our little juniper, brought from Austria, once the size of a boot. We planted it with such care. And now, why, it's a towering tree. Its branches provide grateful shade as well as shutting out the street and passers-by. In the old days, I seldom stepped into the street without a group of peepers all about, and those cameras poking over the hedges, so disconcerting. And yet, here within our house and grounds, I feel perfect peace and harmony. Isn't it odd how such different and opposite feelings can exist side by side? This house so captivated our imagination from the moment we saw it. Remember what you said, Gertrude, as you were packing your paints for our first visit to the island. You said we just might find a barn someday. And now look where we are. Remember that old weather-beaten man who said to us, "Any off-islander who buys that pig barn will be like a man sitting on a hornet's nest." But we didn't listen, did we? We found that grocer on Main Street, and we persisted. "Belongs to the old town," he said. "But we love that barn," I blurted out. "Well, my children, if you love it so, I just might sell it to you." And he did. Wouldn't we have been astonished if we could have seen the turn of events then? The sunken garden, the wall with the great boulders, and the shallow pool with that kingfisher fountain. What luck to have found that tile waiting for me in the thrift shop, and only $1. "This is it," I cried as I handed the tile to the waiting mason. He held it in place. "Designed for the spot," we said in chorus. And of course those magnificent gates. Look at them, 12 feet high, forged by hand. When I saw them, I forgot all else as I contemplated their beauty. I knew I had no place to put them, no place at all. Yet I knew I must have them. Their beauty must be ours. Those massive gates found in a junkyard before we even owned the barn, a perfect fit from the roof to the pig pen below, 12 feet. Some might call this a mere folly, a supreme folly, our supreme folly. My, how the town did talk and criticize us. All the taunts we endured, those who were for us, those who were against. No longer did we hear faint whispers drift over the fence. Storm clouds broke out all around us. Who ever heard of wrought iron gates or cutting a hole in the side of a barn? It's preposterous, they said. But someone insisted. Genius. A stroke of sheer genius. Why, it's sacrilegious. Sacrilegious. But oh, so attractive. So attractive. Surely we will win in the end, I said to Gertrude. They will see the beauty in all that we have done. Divine mind knows if we just step aside and let it work. Remember what Keats said? Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. He must have had our home and us in mind when he wrote that. I truly believe that art captures the eternal in the everyday. And each day, as our house came together, the power of those ideas were assembling themselves like pieces in a puzzle. how much that virus called art has enriched our lives. Despite all our Quaker upbringing and parental warnings against too much decoration, we stubbornly persisted. Why, we became drunk with the joy of creating. And now, look at all the beauty we are surrounded by. So many precious objects collected over so many years from so many places. Those rugs our brother Jay brought back from the Southwest. 2 peacock chairs from Manila. The Russian samovar. Those 6 golden pillars. And that Chinese porcelain. No one can say that's not native to this island. Why, it came here on a clipper ship. Do you remember the blacksmith who played in the barn as a young boy? One day he came to visit us. "My God," he exclaimed as he opened the garden gate. "They told me, but I wouldn't believe them." As he walked toward the patio, he continued, "My God, they told me, but I wouldn't believe them." He stood in awe beside the golden pillars. "My God," they told me, but I wouldn't believe them. Then he stepped over to the wrought iron gates and touched the intricate design with such reverence. And all he said as he walked away, "My God." How I cherish all that we have been blessed with. And yet, a question keeps rising up within me. Is it only what we see, chairs and rugs and tables, which pass in time? Or is there something enduring, which lasts beyond the broken chair, the faded fabric, the worn-out rug? Something that lasts as a symbol of our love, as a part of eternal love. That eternal love which we name God. Gertrude always said, "Hannah, you take yourself much too seriously." She liked to tease me, but we both knew the power of that love. Why, when I was just 16, I remember it as yesterday. I was valedictorian of my class, and I chose a poem by Shelley to read before a large audience. It was a long poem. It began, "A sensitive plant in the garden grew." I did not recite it. I was that sensitive plant. At first, there was a shock of surprise, then interest, then silent attention. I remember it well. To me, the closing line hit the mark. For love and beauty and delight, there is no death nor change. At 16, I vaguely sensed the truth of this statement. Now I know. For love and beauty and delight, there is no death. Dear Gertrude, I feel you so close with me today. How I do miss her. She knew it was love and a sense of humor that got us through. But never mind all that. These memories keep floating before my eyes like colorful soap bubbles. They pass so fleetingly, yet they feel so timeless. And then they are gone as though they had never been. Strange, isn't it? But it seems to me that time is but a limited view of eternity. The moment we call today and the moment we call yesterday seem so very close. But now I know that whatever turmoil we created here really had nothing to do with us. It was a crash between the complacent past and the oncoming era, instead of a gradual awakening to the inevitable change. The reaction to the house today is, well, amusing, really. Informative, of course, though I dare say unnerving at times. Nevertheless, I can't help but remember that nameless man who came to our door each summer. Why, he was like some bird, some migratory bird. We never knew his name. He would just show up from time to time. Don't you remember what he said? Miss Monahan, he would say, my stay on the island is not complete without stopping here at this house. It epitomizes to me the charm, the mystery, the history, all here in one spot. Why, I quite agree, don't you? Oh, my flowers for the basket. Divine mind knew.
Thank you so much, Beverly.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Beverly. Our executive director, Bill Tramposh, unfortunately couldn't join us here today, but he sent these flowers in a little letter that I'm going to read to you now.
Thank you, Bill.
It says, Dear Beverly, I'm so sorry I cannot be present to hear your talk today. I'm fundraising in New York City, as you know. The difference you have made to this institution is enormous, and we cannot thank you and the William Froelich Foundation enough. Thanks, too, for the spirit you breathe back into Hanna Monaghan. It is inspiring. All the best, Bill.
Thank you. No, thank you, dear.
So if anyone has any questions or would like to share any of their personal memories and experiences with Greater Light, please do just throw a hand up and I'll run over with the microphone so everybody can hear.
I just didn't catch the time frame of Hannah's.
They came in 1939, and Hannah died in 1972, and Gertrude died 10 years previously. Gertrude was older. Excuse me. Hannah's elderly. I tried not to do too much of dates in history and do it as a history lessoner, but I do think that the flavor seems to come from perhaps the Quaker belief in the inner light and the house. If you've seen it, have you seen it? Well, you must go over there. In fact, I hope David announced that the new books are just in. And Hannah's writing. She repeats. Supreme folly, my God, my God. And she does it with such a way that by finding, first it's a little annoying perhaps, but then you get onto it. Her excitement, her enthusiasm, the way she writes about how she feels is just contagious. I've read the book at least 100 times and underlined it even more so again and again. I have 3 copies.
No, the house is open regularly from May through October, so Columbus Day weekend.
Well, I must admit, when Hannah and Gertrude had it, and when Selena was the docent there, you never knew which was what, where, because everything was a bit of a jumble, and I loved it, of course, but it wasn't a jumble, but things were all around. It's been cleaned up a bit so things can happen there, like Shakespeare and yoga, if you can believe it. I think Hannah and Gertrude doing yoga is quite an image for me to think about.
But yeah, the house will be
I never
opening
get
again.
there to do the yoga.
It'll be open again in May, and then it's there from 11 till 4 every day, and you can go in and just walk around and have a docent-led tour and answer any questions you have. It's an amazing space.
And Chris is always generous enough to open the door if you knock hard, but not too hard.
Yes, as you mentioned, we're doing yoga this month at Greater Light, and then in May, on the 1st and the 2nd, we're going to be doing our annual night of poetry with theater workshop. So if you're interested in getting into the house before it opens up, you have some opportunities with yoga and also with this wonderful night of poetry that we do on May 1st and 2nd, or 2 nights of poetry.
I just want to say one thing about some of the slides, because I had the privilege of being able to go in and out of Greater Light while it was being renovated. So some of the slides that you see here were taken from that. But there's a frame like this in Greater Light with slides continually changing, and that's my tribute to Greater Light through the renovation. Then I went to Gosnell Hall, and I was able to see all of Hannah's things and fabrics and open boxes. So some of the fabrics you saw there were taken from those viewings, and it's extraordinary what's not being shown in Greater Light, though you couldn't show everything and still have it as a public space. But it is just quite extraordinary what those sisters collected.
Absolutely. Do we have any other questions? Well, if not, I definitely encourage everyone to come up and look at the amazing things that Beverly has brought with her today to set the scene. And also, once again, the gift shop is open for you guys if you do want to head over and take a look at the book. It just came in. It's a brand new print run. It's only $10.
And there is a book here of some of the fabrics and some of the things from the
We have a
center.
little photo
So
album.
thank you all for coming.
Thank you again, Beverly.